What's up guys, it's Village Kev Talks here with another video. This is the first video I've ever done where it's not clearly gay content, but it's rooted in my experiences, which are gay experiences. So it'll make more sense once I go into it. But basically, I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Basically, I've had this on my mind and I'm kind of like struggling with it. I don't know the right way to go about certain situations when this theme comes up. So specifically, for those of you who've been watching, I talked about how I've been reading some books, and last year I put out a video in, I think, August, where it finally hit me that I have a tendency to make assumptions, and that oftentimes I'm wrong, particularly about dating and just people in general, relationships in general, but specifically about men. And then I realized that it was all in my head, and so I've been actively avoiding doing that and avoiding making assumptions and just giving people the benefit of the doubt. And you know, you always hear people talk about the importance of forgiveness, right, and giving a second chance. So that's something that I've been doing, but then I've been trying to balance that with something else you hear all the time, which is a phrase that Maya Angelou made popular, and that's when people show you who they are, believe them. Right? And to trust your instincts and to trust your gut. And that's also something that I've always had an issue with. I've always avoided trusting my instincts and trusting somebody else's instincts or somebody else's advice, and then realizing I was right all along. So this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Like, how do you balance that? How do you balance forgiveness and not jumping to conclusions and getting your feelings involved, but then also trusting what your feelings tell you, right? And knowing when you need to pay attention to the red flags. So this is something that's been on my mind because specifically there have been a few guys who I was chatting with back and forth, and I was immediately turned off by some of their idiosyncrasies, I guess, in the way that they would communicate. The way that they would communicate in general, things that they said, I was like, oh, this rubs me the wrong way, but I had that in my mind, don't make assumptions, don't make assumptions. And then it got to the point where I was like, well, now I just feel like I'm compromising my self-esteem because I don't like the way this is making me feel, and I feel like I'm like chasing this person. And I have a few friends who I trust, and we talk about stuff like this, like how do you gauge these situations? And I wanted to share their feedback because I thought it was really interesting. So one friend was like, look, it's good to not jump to conclusions and whatnot, but for me personally, meaning for her, she was saying, people tend to show their best self at first, whether it's a job interview, whether it's a date. So if from the start, there's things that are totally irking you, cut it off. Because if that's their best self, and then later on you're gonna see more of their real self, then what does that signal? Kind of a harsh mentality, right? That you're expecting perfection, and if that's not the case, if there's anything that turns you off, cut it out. But that's how she lives her life, and she is happy living that way. She doesn't want to waste her time. Life is too short. That's her mentality. Another thing she told me related to this conversation is, know what your standards are. Like, write them down physically. Know what your list of things are that these are non-negotiables. And I thought all of her feedback was really helpful, but in my mind I thought, I agree, but I also want to be open-minded. Also, it kind of shell-shocked me because I thought, I don't know what my standards are. There are obviously some things that I think are general turn-offs for everybody, right? You know, I don't want to date somebody who's already in a relationship. Like, I don't want to be a third partner. I don't want to be involved in an open relationship. Abuse, you know what I mean? Like, there's certain things that are clear-cut non-negotiables. But in terms of other standards, what she was saying, like red flags that you just are not willing to look past. So for example, for her, one of hers is, if a guy doesn't pay on a first date, she just knows it's not the kind of traditional man that she wants. And that sounds maybe close-minded, but she's like, it doesn't really matter how great of a time we have. I know what kind of person I want, and that's somebody who's very traditional. And she's not like stingy either. She has a clear-cut sort of blueprint of how things should be. So in her mind, it's like every third date I will pay as the woman in this union. And that for her is a standard, non-negotiable. So I was thinking, and I was like, I don't know what my standards are. And I think part of it is because I've been disappointed so many times with men that I'm like, maybe I'm the problem, and maybe I just need to be more open-minded and not, again, jump to conclusions. So with her feedback, even though I understood it and it made sense, I didn't know how to actually apply it to my own life. Then I talked to a second friend who's also got a lot of great wisdom whenever we talk about stuff like this, and she said, look, when it comes to assumptions, making assumptions, you can either make them or you don't make them. But either way, you don't really know the truth. You have your perception of things, and then you have the actual truth. She didn't say it explicitly, but what I interpreted her words to mean was, even when you're not making assumptions, you're still making an assumption about not making an assumption. Either way, it's still your perception, which is not reality. So she said, the real way to handle it, if you're wasting time on it, you might as well waste time communicating with the person, right? And then you get the clarity that you need. And if the person still sort of communicates in a way that rubs you the wrong way, or typically when you communicate vulnerably with somebody, then you'll see what you really need to see, right? Because if they kind of reject that or they don't meet you halfway, then you know what you need to know. And again, this isn't just about dating. I think it's about family, it's about professional relationships, everything. But I applied what she said because that, to me, that was easier for me to apply than what my other friend had said. And I thought, you're right. Either way, even if I'm not making assumptions, I'm spending time thinking about this when I could just be communicating with the person and figuring out for real what this is here, this dynamic. So I did it, and I found out what I needed to know, which was, sadly, that my instincts were correct, and that some people just can't meet you halfway. So I learned my lesson, which again was a reminder of trust your instincts. But this is something that I grapple with, and that I'm sure everybody, whether they realize it or not, grapples with this. Like, when do you decide when to forgive, when to give a second chance versus just trusting your instincts? And so, like anything else, you can take as much feedback as you want from other people. But I realized that for me, what really works, other than communicating, which was a great piece of advice from my friend, and figuring out what your standards are from my other friend, what I realized works for me is give the person a shot. If you're disappointed, but you still have this yearning to connect with that person, and again, not even just dating, let's say a professional contact, networking, whatever. If you still have a yearning where you're like, oh, I want to try again, but you're disappointed by the first experience, try it again, one more time. And then if it's still disappointment, then you know what you need to know. And to me, that's a logical way of handling this, because my favorite book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And in the book, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, when something happens once, it may never happen again. If something happens twice, it's likely to happen a third time, and fourth time, and fifth time, and so on. And so that's how I'm now thinking about this sort of conflict that I've been thinking about, of how do I really, what's really the best way to handle connections with new people and stuff. And it's a combination of everything. You trust your instincts, but you also give people the benefit of the doubt. But that doesn't mean you need to keep allowing somebody to irk you or to disappoint you over and over and over. Going off of that line from The Alchemist, if it's happened twice, it's probably going to happen a third time. Let me know what you think about this, and if you have any other substantive feedback relating to this. Some of you guys leave lengthy comments that I always appreciate reading and kind of like analyzing with you guys. So talk soon.